It's the weirdest thing ever. And I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's affecting his daily activities. It stopped being a fad and became like a debilitating mental health issue, you know? It all started a couple weeks ago. One day my friend Tim dropped in a conversation that he thought he had a stalker. And of course I was like, "What? A stalker?" And he's like, "Yeah, there's this figure that I see all the time, kind of from afar and usually out of the corner of my eye. She followed me here." By the way, he's deaf, so he signs it to me, so I typed it as figure. In sign language, you don't have pronouns. He uses a sign for someone or something, and with 2 fingers he indicates that someone's eyes are watching and gazing at him from afar. We are in a cafe. I ask him to point to the figure. He steps outside, looks around, and points to an intersection a block down. It's a city in the morning rush hour, people walking everywhere. So I ask, "The lady in the red hat? The dude in the Packers jacket?" He keeps shaking his head, no. But he's got his eye on something or someone. He tells me to forget it. We go back to the house and he doesn't mention it again. And when at the end of our meeting I ask if I should be worried, he waves me off and says, offhandedly, that everything is fine, as if he's ashamed he brought it up. But a few days later he calls me on a video link and suggests we meet again, like right now. Can I meet him for dinner? I already had plans, but he seemed so worked up that I said yes. We meet at a small diner. He's barely seated at the table across from me when he says, signing very low so no one can see, although the odds of the chattering people around us knowing sign language are pretty damn slim. "Look, see the woman outside the window?" I look, surveying the street outside. There's just the usual late afternoon pedestrian traffic. I look back at Tim and shrug. His eyes dart to the window, and he describes the woman he saw, a brunette, mid-30s to mid-40s, wearing a gray sweatshirt and pants. Okay, I look again. Well, there's a woman, curly brown hair with a baby. No. He shakes his head, sighs, and runs his fingers through his hair, then turns and stares. He continues to stare. I lean over to follow his gaze to the window. There's no one there. "Hey," I say, "are you sure you're feeling okay?" "I've been seeing her every day for 2 weeks, he interrupts, now signing quickly. "She started from afar, but every day she got closer and closer." He brings his hands closer and closer together and adds, "I'm worried about what happens when..." His hands make contact. "Who is she? Have you, tried approaching her? Does she look like someone you know?" All I can think of is that it must be a relative. Maybe he's hallucinating someone important to him. Tim has a history of depression, has struggled with some form of mental illness for most of his life, and spent most of his youth alone or keeping things to himself because his family is hearing and never bothered to learn sign language. It occurred to me to ask if he'd ever signed with this woman, but when I asked if she was hearing or deaf, he shook his head. I don't know, and said he'd never met her. Well, not really, but he knows who she is. I snorted. It seems like he's being deliberately vague. He claims to know her, but has never met her. I ask him again who she is. He becomes even more agitated, rubbing his hands together and looking over his shoulder. "Oh," he says, "she moved." "Where?" I ask. "To the door." There's no one behind the door. It's pretty obvious there's no one behind the door, but he keeps furtively glancing at me. He looks at me, smiles, and makes the 2-finger motion again. His eyes stare and stare and stare and stare at him. I ask him if he wants to leave. He says no, she'll just show up everywhere he goes. I push back my chair and walk to the door. He watches me with a strange mixture of horror and fascination. I open the door, go outside, come back in, and sit down with him again. I repeat to him that no one is there. He rubs his eyes with the palms of his hands and finally says, Okay. I ask him again how he knows her. This summer, Tim tells me he and his friends went camping. Old friends he hadn't seen since Gallaudet. One of them knew of a hiking trail with scenic views, remote enough to be less traveled than the more famous peaks. Along the trail is a cabin, rustic but well built, a log cabin like the one in the picture on the postcard. The outhouse has a small window in the door and similar log construction. Everyone goes into the cabin, but Tim goes back out to use the outhouse. The stench is unpleasant even from a distance. Tim holds his breath, wondering if he should just go into the woods instead. But he braves the stench and opens the door, and a cloud of flies flies out, circling around him in a storm of black wings. And in that moment, the stench hits him like a wave, making his eyes water and his stomach jump as he stumbles away from the outhouse and dashes away. When he looks inside, there's a woman sitting on the toilet bench. She's kind of curled up in the corner, gray sweatshirt, gray sweatpants, brown hair falling down around her. What little he can make out of her face, her skin, bloated and blotchy. He only has time to catch a glimpse of her, and then he rushes screaming into the cabin, bursts inside, waving his arms. "Call police! Police, now! A woman is dead in the bathroom. Call the police, now, now!" And his friends look up, studying the backpack they found with wallet, phone, and unfinished moldy lunch, also clearly belonging to the corpse in the outhouse. "And it's definitely the same woman?" I ask him. He nods. "The police came and took her body away," he says. "They found no evidence of foul play, and he and his friends were allowed to leave after questioning." He shows me her obituary. Apparently she was cremated, and the funeral took place a few weeks ago, but it's definitely her, he says. "Good." I hesitate for a moment. "Okay, you had a really traumatic incident. I mean, it must have been traumatic to find a dead body. So maybe what you're seeing is caused by, like, flashbacks because of the trauma." "You didn't ask me how she died." "Oh, how she died." He told me she died of dehydration when the heat and lack of water killed her a few days later. But she could have gotten out at any time. There was nothing stopping her. No lock on the door, no marks or signs of violence, no animal tracks outside. Nothing. Why did she choose to stay and die? Why? He was clearly agonizing over that question. "That's odd," I agree. "But I'm far more worried about Tim's mental health than I am about this woman who chose to end her life in the woods. Tim's obsession with her, his trauma from finding her after her death, has undermined his already fragile mental state." "Do you think your obsession with finding out why she died might be fueling these visions?" I asked him. "I mean, whether you're seeing her because of the trauma or because of some kind of hallucinations, it's not like you can change what happened. I think you should see a psychiatrist. Maybe you can get some medication to get rid of the hallucinations." He chuckles unhappily. "Kill a hallucination that's already dead?" But he agrees to see a psychiatrist. As we get up to leave, he seems to feel a little rested. At the door, however, he stops, his face contorted with worry. He waits, letting me through first to open it, and asks me to swing it open for him. Only then does he step forward. 3 days later, I get another text from Tim. He is stuck and asks me to come see him. When I arrive, his door is ajar, but I find it rude to enter, so I press the doorbell and watch the light flicker on. My phone buzzes. "Come in." Tim greets me as soon as I step inside, like he was just waiting for this. He has a bag in his hands. He tells me he's running late. He's going to have a big problem at work. Can I come downstairs with him? He'll explain everything later. He leads me down the stairs and at the front door of the building stops abruptly so that I almost bump into him, and asks me to open the door, even though it's partially open and he could have easily pushed it open. I swing the door wide open and he runs out, signing, "Thanks, sorry, I'll explain everything after work." In the evening, he asks me to let him back into the building, and after I let him in, the door isn't even locked. The front door of the building is ajar. He leads me to his unit and examines the door. It's closed. His posture visibly relaxes as he unlocks it and invites me in for a beer. He then embarrassingly admits to me that he's had a few rough days. In fact, he's called in sick a couple times, because now it's always at the door. "Who?" I ask, and then at his withering look. "Oh, but we just walked through the door." "Yeah, open doors are normal, closed doors are fine, but didn't you notice that the building door was ajar?" He shows the partially open door with his hands, leaving a small gap between them, and then grips one hand representing the door with the other. Her fingers were holding it open. I don't know what to say to that. This seems like a whole new level of delusion. Tim hands me a beer from the fridge, explaining that she's always at the door now, but he can only see her fingers and sometimes her eyes. "So what happens if you open the door?" I wonder. He only sullenly takes a sip of his beer, and then his gaze becomes detached. He's focused on something behind me. I turn around. The door to the bedroom is ajar. I turn back to look at him. "Is she in there, in the bedroom? Can you see the fingers?" His eyes meet mine. His face is flat. Deaf people are usually very expressive. Half the grammar is on the face, not the hands. But lately he's been almost robotic. So finally he makes this gesture. 2 fingers pointing at himself, staring intently and intently. Then he signs, FML. I stand up, come to the ajar door. Tim goes pale, eyes rounded, but says nothing. Just takes another sip of beer and watches me. I push the door open, reach up, run my hand along the edge of the ajar door, push it further open, swinging it back and forth. I look at him and raise my eyebrows like, see? That's nothing. There's nothing in there. He hums, and his eyelids flinch. I don't think he slept enough. Hey, do you need someone to stay with you? Nope. He waves me off. Go home. So I did. But here's why I'm writing this post. He hasn't gotten better. He continues to ask me to help him when he gets stuck. One time it was at his workplace. Another time it was at his apartment. The last time I was there, I noticed that he had removed all the doors except the front door to his apartment. It had become completely debilitating to his life. And the last time I saw him, he kept ranting about her, about how it didn't save her. And I didn't know what he meant. Obviously, no one had saved her. She was dead when he found her. No, no, he pounced on me. You don't understand. Everything she's been through, and it didn't save her. I can see he's getting depressed. I worry that he will quit his job and just stop leaving his apartment and never go out. How can I help my friend? I never actually posted what I wrote above because I felt like maybe I shouldn't put Tim's problems out there, like it wasn't my story. But I'm sharing it now because he called me this afternoon, angry. He took my advice and the psychiatrist told him to put the doors in place, and if he sees fingers again, to close his eyes and open the door. That this was an obsession over which he must gain power. So he followed the instructions, put all the doors in place, and now, he told me, he's fucked. He's stuck in his closet. Look, I'm going to go to you, and then we're going to open the door together, okay? I'll hold your hand while you push. I may have said that a little too sarcastic, but then as I walked toward her, I remembered his last words about her, about how everything she'd been through didn't save her. Of course, at that moment I thought, well, yes, you found her rotting. Obviously, she wasn't saved. But as I rode the bus to his place, it finally dawned on me what he really meant. You see, the fact that he found her body in the corner meant that she never opened the door. She'd rather die than go near that door, but it still got to her. And maybe that means Tim has no way of escaping either. When this revelation comes to me, a sudden icy panic grips me, because I'm the one who told him to go to the doctor, that he was dreaming it all up, and to just take the door. And my heart beats 1,000 beats a minute like a hummingbird when I try to call him on the video link. It just keeps ringing and ringing. Finally, the agonizing bus ride ends, and I jump off the bus and rush into his building, taking 2 steps at a time. Out of breath, I enter his apartment, swinging open the closet door. Nothing but clothes on hangers, shoe boxes, plastic storage containers, and blankets. I stomp my foot hard on the wooden floorboards to alert him of my arrival. Nothing. I retreat back into the bedroom, the bathroom, the living room. I stomp again so hard and loud that the downstairs neighbors are sure to complain. No response. I ring my phone, ringing and ringing and ringing, and finally I see a light flash on the floor of the closet behind the door. And when I bend down to pick it up, when I straighten up, I notice that the door, it's closed behind me and is now barely ajar. And there, straddling the edges of the closet door, lie Tim's fingers. At first I think it's a prank. Haha, I sign sarcastically, even though he can't see me. So I reach for the door and stop. I'm not sure why I stopped. Some kind of instinct. I wait for him to open it. It's been over an hour. I'm still waiting. I think I'm going to need help getting out. But once I do, what do I do next? How do I make sure that Oh my God. Tim just... His hand still around the door and his index finger just unclenched and flexed again. Pulls me closer. Please help me. What am I supposed to do?